Hello, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Greenway Forward podcast. Today, I am particularly excited because we have Christina Khalil, a Senate candidate for New Jersey. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're
Thank
really
you.
glad to have people who are going to be actually running for seats and places. And I figured, hey, episode 2, we may as well get someone on as early as possible. So, this was a treat that responded so fast, and we've been in contact recently, and very, very excited to hear all about things with you.
Well, I'm thank you for reaching out, and I love and I support independent media, and it's important to support all independent media to help uplift, especially the beginners. And I'm
Mhm.
so humbled to be on the second podcast.
Yeah, so could you just hear about your story about becoming a leftist and your whole origins of maybe running for senator and how you got to the place you're in right now in politics?
Okay, I always was a progressive Democrat. So when I started this campaign, I started as a progressive Democrat, and a lot of people, and I always bring this up in every speech because people are like, "Well, you used to be a Dem. What happened?" Blah, blah, blah. Well, what happened was you cannot actually be a progressive Democrat. So
Absolutely.
I've always been on the left. So growing up, I'm a first generation, and the war on drugs, the poverty, and the system broke my entire family up. So I wound up growing up in foster care. I was a homeless youth and in shelters, and everyone just kept saying the message that if you just work hard, everything works out, and then you're able to get an apartment, buy a house. All you have to do is work hard, stay on the right track, and everything's going to be good. You just have to be a good law abiding citizen, and everything. It's not reality.
Mhm.
So working two jobs, still struggle to pay for an apartment. I'm working two jobs now while running for Senate, living paycheck to paycheck. I worked frontline um during the COVID pandemic. Wow, I don't my entire life, sorry, my brain works too fast. My entire life I've always been a leftist, but what really led me down the Senate candidate road was the COVID epidemic. And working on the front lines at the hospital, it really opened my eyes to the administration and the poor policies. And we had nurses, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, myself, social workers, therapists. We were advocating and saying, this is what we need. This is how we can make things better. We need to hire more people. We need to have breaks during longer breaks during shifts because we're working overtime. Well, and it was all ignored, and it was us versus the administration. And when one of us died, it was, oh, let's get a feel good moment from the publicity. Let's have people recognize them. It was more of like a highlight for the hospitals, not and there wasn't anything for the families, the survivors of the person that passed away. And I'm talking about the staff working, not the patients.
Mhm.
So and it became such a hard time where a lot of people started leaving the healthcare industry and saying like, I can't, there's no point in helping people because you can't help people. And we started going into a real shortage. We were at a shortage already for like healthcare workers, but then we were going to even more of a shortage. And it got into, so those of us that wound up staying, it got into even more of an issue because we had the administration going, okay, we're going to stop with the PCR test because we want more money.
Mhm.
And in order to get more money, we're going to double up on beds. And we were just like, we can't do that. We have to do the PCR test because we don't know what this disease is. Like, this virus is still very new. And they wound up doubling on the beds. They were ignoring the doctors. They were ignoring the other professionals. And it just kept going into this downward spiral of like horrendous behavior. And it was all for money. And even when it came to like addiction, working in that field, it just got progressively worse. More people were relapsing, more people were overdosing, more people were passing away. So it was I worked at a medical detox. I should have said this in the beginning. So I worked at a medical detox in the hospital during the COVID pandemic. So I was dealing with COVID and people that were struggling with withdrawals and need medical detox. And it was, no one in the administration cared. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore because too many people are dying. This is too stressful. We're not able to help. Rehabs aren't taking people in. We're sending people back to the streets. So a lot of the times the insurance companies would tell me we don't, like, they don't want to pay. They're saying like a person's not sick enough, and I'm like, I'm assessing them. I'm telling you they're very sick.
Mm.
The doctors co-signing saying that they're very sick. They need to get treatment because if I send them out, they're going to die most likely. We're at a risk. And then the insurance company was like, that's not my problem. Try again in 24 hours. Because when you get denied, you can't do it the same day. You literally have to wait until the clock hits midnight to try again. So it's like, what do you do at that time? And the insurance companies wanted people to come pretty much on their deathbed or so sick with withdrawal that they could barely walk. And it's like, if they hit that point, they're going to the substances to self-medicate so that way they feel better. They're not coming to detox. So it opened my eyes to a whole bunch of issues. And I was just like, what do I do in that area? Like, what else can I do? These policies don't matter. You're working hard. They're saying do this, but they're not fixing these giant gaps that they're creating. So the war on drugs is a complete failure. But it was just like, what else can I do? So I wound up leaving and I took a break. I wound up going to a high school for a year, and it was a little refresher to have a different atmosphere, but it also opened another door of issues where it's just like, okay, kids need better access to mental health. Parents are really dictating a lot of things. Suicide and depression is really high when it comes to the youth. And this was the first year back where these kids were in school full time and not virtually. So it opened. So how do we transition? How do we help get these kids back with their social skills, gain the social skills, get them caught up in school? And there was no investment from administration. It was, oh, here's a grant for this, here's a little bit of money for that, here's X amount of dollars for this. It was literally a huge trial that it was it was fun, but it was also stressful because these kids could get help more. And so I can't go into too much detail because I know that there's laws protecting the stories of the people that I worked with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But what do you do at the point when you have kids that are struggling with mental health and then you're calling up the parents and you're like, okay, your kid would really benefit from therapy, and the kid's asking for therapy and begging for therapy, and the parents are just like, it's they're making it, who cares? Like, how do you handle that? And that's a normal issue for teenagers. Oh, they're just a teenager, they don't know what real life issues are. They're not really depressed, they're just doing this for attention. And I'm just like, no, your kid's saying this and this, that's not attention, that's a serious cry for help. So it just, you keep going, you see all these policy failures, and studying policies and writing grants and managing grants and um, exploring, fixing the gaps. It's, I just got so annoyed with Menendez not doing his job, and his election was coming up. And Cory Booker's equally as bad. He's not good at all, but his election wasn't coming up. And I was just like, you know what? If you're not going to do your job, I'm going to do it for you. And then I started studying, how to run a Senate race, how to do this, what is it like? I had conversations with a lot of people, and I made the commitment to myself. And I was just like, okay, if I'm going to run this race, I'm not doing it for myself because there is not going to be a gain, because whether I win or lose, I have to do it for the right reasons. And I really spoke with a lot of people, and because I knew the stress, the stress level that this is going to be put on me. And I was just like, all right, it wasn't for me, it was for the people that I've worked with in the community and the other people I haven't worked with, but the families that have suffered tremendously and the individuals who have hurt, because I'm at a place in my life where I'm stable and I'm in a safe environment, and I'm okay. So I could just grow my career the way it is, or I could risk it all and run a Senate race. So that's where I was just like, I could fix everything. I have studied it. I have multiple, over almost 10 years of experience. I have worked in multiple different levels of care. I have worked with legal. Uh, I have worked with police. I have worked with prosecutors, lawyers, DCP&P. I have worked with parole, probation, prison, addiction, mental health, community outreach. So I've done it all and I see where the problems lie. So I'm actually able to close the gaps together. And that's where I was just like, okay, I'm going to run. So I started as a Democrat, a progressive Democrat. And then the election happened in June 6th of 2023 this year. And they really, the corporate Dems pushed the progressive Dems out. They do not support them. They said it to my face. I called a friend up who was an actual elected official in a local town, and he said, oh, you can't just pick a race, you have to wait till you're asked. It's a popularity contest, you can't just decide you're running a race. And I'm like, wait, it shouldn't be about popularity, and I shouldn't be waiting till I'm asked. It's about the best candidate, it's about who has the best solutions, it's about fixing the problems, not about keeping everything in line. And then in the election in June, they had in South Jersey, they separated the progressive Dems and the established Dems. So you could only vote for a box of people. You could not vote for individual people. And that's an issue in New Jersey because they have this line and they could design the election exactly however they want to benefit them, not to actually help the people that want to make change. So if you voted for the progressive Dems in New Jersey, there were so many seats that were going to be left unavailable. So it forced a lot of people to vote for the corporate Dems, the corrupted ones, so that way all those seats were available. So it was voter suppression. And I have a picture. I can send it to you afterwards if you would like to like
Sure.
post it. So it just shows the level of corruption that New Jersey engages in. And then when I spoke with the New Jersey Democratic Party committee, they said to me, "We're not going to. We like your policies, but we're not going to support you. Menendez is our friend. That's who we're going to support." And I'm just like, "Wait, but we need progressiveness. Like Menendez isn't going to make these changes.
No.
We have families suffering, people suffering individually." And it does start at the top. It doesn't start at the bottom. The policies, the federal policies that are enacted, and that like federally we could do universal health care. That's going to help every individual person. Federally, I can invest and redesign mental health. That's going to help individual people. I can redesign immigration. That's going to help the entire country individually. So it's like we have a whole bunch of pathways to take, but it starts at the top, and he's not willing to do it because we've had so many speakers speak to him. We've had so many activists go to him, and all he does is nod his head, just like Cory Booker, and says okay, and continues to do what he does. So I spoke to the Green Party. I was connected to them, and they said your platform matches what we believe in. So if you would be interested to switching over, we would be interested in having you run. I was like, okay. And then I spoke with the Green Party. I did an interview. They vetted me. And it turns out, and that's where the transition came along because it's impossible to do it as a progressive Dem in New Jersey. You cannot do it. And the squad is a larger scale showing that says you can't do it within the party because they always back down on what they're supposed to stand up for, what people voted for them, and what they represent versus having a third party is the only way to break the duopoly up. We're not scared to call out the corruption. We're not scared to say things. We're not scared to hold people accountable, and we're not scared to have the entire party be mean to me. What, the Democrats won't talk to me when I'm elected in office because they're too arrogant and full of themselves? That's on them.
So be
That's
it.
not a me issue. That's a them issue.
Yeah, and
So
that's
that's it.
and that's another reason why, and you made a very good point. I feel like it doesn't get talked enough a lot in leftist circles about the squad in office and people like them. And that's one of the reasons I have problems with DSA is because they're elected into office as these progressive socialist candidates, but at the end of the day, they will always fall towards right-wing capitalism. And they will always fall towards not supporting progressivism. And it's proof enough whenever you have so-called progressive socialists endorsing Biden. And
Yeah.
that's proof enough that's a lot of the reasons why Pittsburgh DSA is one I've been talked about a lot. to by Allegheny Greens members, which is an organization I'm a member of, one of the most active Green Party uh, groups in the country, actually. And they're always talking about Pittsburgh DSA, and they seem like a fine enough group, but DSA as a whole, it just seems like they're trying to appeal to true socialists, and they just end up at the
Mhm.
very end always falling to capitalism. Will always endorse the corrupt capitalist corporate Democrat at the end of the day. If they were actually progressive, they would either be leaving the party or they'd be endorsing more progressive options. But you got someone that claims to be a progressive socialist endorsing Joe Biden. Like, what does that show?
Yep. Yep. And it shows that they fell in line and they don't care. They care about their pockets, and they just use the progressive stance to get votes and to get money and to get donations. They don't actually mean it. And a good example is like during COVID, we could have had universal health care. But it was a Democrat that blocked it. It was Nancy Pelosi
Hmm.
that blocked it. And she got an award for blocking it. And you could have saved so many lives with that. And the squad did not stand up against it. So it just speaks volumes because they could have stood up against it. They could have forced them to say, they could have said, we're not having you as House Speaker anymore. We're going against you. We need universal health care. They could have caused a ruckus because the entire country would have stood by them. So it's them not trusting the voters either that voted them in, because if we need to do a protest or we need to do a sit-in, if we need to do something to protect you, we would have stood by your side while you stood up for us. But you trusted us to get you into office, but you didn't trust us to protect you while you were in office challenging the establishment.
Exactly, and you're so right about that. The whole universal healthcare thing, it just blows my mind how you could be seeing the carnage that capitalism causes and be,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my government run healthcare. I want my freedom, you know. You hear that a lot, and especially in more conservative areas, and it just really boggles my mind how you'd rather pay, sometimes upwards of $1,000 to $2,000 a month just for the privilege of
Mm-hmm.
having health insurance, not even counting any deductibles, just for the privilege of having it, versus paying an extra $500 a month on taxes to have everything covered. It boggles my mind how we have people who are like unironically against the idea of universal health care. I don't know where that comes from. I feel like it's just propaganda because, as I mentioned in episode one, we have this thing in America where
Mm-hmm.
you say the word socialist and everyone freaks out because we've been propagandized to believe scary socialism is bad.
Yeah, 100%. And so there's this myth out there, and this is where studying policy really comes in and understanding the budget, and that's why the Senate race is very, very important. Your taxes will not raise at all
It
with
won't.
universal health care. So you're saving, like I know families that are paying 40,000 a year. You have a nuclear family, a traditional family, you're paying a lot of money, plus the copayment, plus the premium, plus the deductible. It's raising. Why not save that money in your pocket and not have your taxes raise at all?
And that's
Because the
true, yeah.
money, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But in you might even have your taxes raised a little bit. I mean, if the budget's balanced more, in an ideal world, there would be much less taxes. It wouldn't be funding all that money to the police and military and foreign nations and such. But even if your
Mhm.
taxes were to increase, they would be less than what you're spending on healthcare regardless. So if you're spending twelve hundred
Oh
dollars a month
yeah.
on healthcare and you have to spend an extra $300 a month on taxes, then you're saving $900 regardless. So
Yep.
regardless if you think the who's gonna pay for it, that's the thing that I really hate the most is the who's gonna pay for it is a red herring that just represents I don't understand this and I don't want this, so I'm just gonna say who's gonna pay for it. It's the easiest deflection that anti-universal healthcare people can go off on, and that gets them praise because they just think, oh, I mean, they're very smart. I mean, they're right. How do we pay for it? I mean, if you take a look at our budget and really study in depth, we are funneling so much money to foreign nations, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I mean, you do sometimes have to help other people and stuff, but not to the degree that we're seeing today. Today's degree is insanity, and
Hmm.
especially all the money. I mean, we're seeing record oil drilling budgets, record military, record police budgets under
Hmm.
Biden, and all that money, I mean, we could have had even something as basic as increasing food stamps. Even something that basic is still not been progressed, or has still not been achieved under anything. We've been able to make no progress whatsoever. And when I was talking to Dylan on episode one, he said like, and that's a reason why a lot of leftists in their earlier, political days might side with the Democrats because they're like, well, the Republicans they're not going to do it. We know the Republicans aren't going to do it, so
Mhm.
I'll vote for the Democrats. And then it's been very clear that the Democrats are also not going to do it.
Yep, and they've had multiple times to do it. And I can guarantee that state taxes would be lowered under Green Party, at least with my policies. So people would save money. And if people had to pay anything at all for universal health care, it would be a couple hundred a year, not even a month, because it's just refunneling money from wasted programs into programs that work, like
Hmm.
universal health care. We don't need to have 47 cop cities in different states when we know that that's not going to work. And on top of it, you have cops with PTSD, you have cops with drug addiction, you have cops with severe mental health issues that are out in the community working, and they're not even getting the proper treatment or the proper support or the proper um, help at all. And it's very toxic within the police department that, if they were to ask for any sort of help, it's frowned upon. Going away for help is frowned upon. They have to work. They feel a lot of guilt leaving their department to go get mental health. They're focused on so they put themselves in harm's way. They'll go like 24 hours without sleep, doing like a third shift to help the department, and then that goes into the community, and the community members feel it, and it starts from the top. The politicians are what is causing the drift between police and the community. And if police were to wake up and realize, as the politicians doing this, they could unite with the community members and demand better unity and better pay and better help. So that way nothing's weaponized against them when they're getting help. And we could get the community members involved with the police and have more investments in the community. So that way the police aren't taking on all the calls and all the responsibilities.
Hmm.
So that is something that I'm working on in my policies as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I feel like the whole cop cities, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing so much more money being funded to those cop cities, those true dangerous groups
Mm-hmm.
around the nation. And then another thing that I consider them, what I like to call them, I like to just consider them extreme police, and that's of course ICE. And we have been funding record budgets to ICE, and I'm thinking like we're funding all this money to ICE, and then these cop cities, all that money, the least we could do, and this would I would take anything at this point, I swear, under this joke of an administration, but I would take anything. At least provide more food stamps. There's so many people who may not have the internet access to recertify their food stamps every once in a while. Sometimes you get denied food stamps even if you're living well below the poverty line. The
Mm-hmm.
least you could do, the least you could do to help people is increase food stamps. I'd be perfectly content with that, but it's of course nowhere near enough. That's like 1% of what we have to do. But the fact that we can fund all these wars in foreign nations, the fact that we can do record oil drilling budgets, we funded we could fund the Willow Project, and we can fund the military, we can fund cops, but we can't fund raising food stamps on the less fortunate. Something as simple as that, we can't even do that because we're told we can't afford it. And you got
100%.
you got
100%
so
agree.
many people that believe that.
And in my policies, one of the things that I'm doing is actually redesigning the entire welfare program on a federal level. And I'm going to remove it from the states because we have to determine what we have to make sure everything matches the livable wage. So whatever matches the livable wage, or however much like food costs in an entire month, that's what a person needs to get in the food stamps. If you need to get rental assistance, that's what you need to get. You don't need to get $800 a month and then be told like you have to figure out, the extra like $2,000.
Hmm.
Like we don't need that. We can end homelessness. We can end poverty. We can end people starving. We can end world hunger with this money. We could save so many lives, but for some reason, they rather destroy the planet and hurt people This is the current administration, instead of helping. So this is why it's very, very important to vote for a third party. They have made it clear as day that they don't care. They lied on the entire platform to beat Trump. And the
Mhm.
only way to beat Trump is progressive policies. You can't act like Trump and expect to get back into office when we all voted Trump out.
Exactly, and I've been seeing a lot more recently, and I've been starting to agree with it. A vote for Biden is a vote for Trump because
Yeah.
let's be real, Biden has absolutely no shot in 2024. He's not going to win. He's
No.
losing to in polls. He's losing to every single Republican on there. Besides, I think Chris Christie, but even then, it's like a 1% difference. It might be like 46 to 45%. And and like seriously, if you're voting for Biden, you're just voting for Trump to win because you're voting for someone who is completely non-viable. I mean, you've got these two old vegetables running against each other, and one of them is more popular than the other. I don't see a single way Biden wins next year, and I've been trying to convince to be like, well, you have to vote for Biden to protect against Trump. Trump would be doing the exact same things that Biden is doing in office right now. He's literally as time has gone on, I realized that Biden is just Trump 2.0. He's Trump's second
Mhm.
administration, but without the red. He's blue Trump and Trump's blue second administration, and
Yep.
that's truly all it is. If you look at all the budgets and all the policies and all even like the war policies, and a lot of people don't. I mean, I look into stuff about international war relations and stuff, but Biden and Trump are pretty much exactly aligned with that. Oil
They
drilling,
really are.
military, police, and it's insane how Biden and Trump are pretty much the same person. And that might be controversial to a lot of people, but it's become clear that they are right the same.
They're twinning.
They
That's
are.
why I say they're
They're
twins.
twinning.
They're totally twins. And even like the replacement for Biden, because after the primaries, and we see the rigging happening today, where the other Democratic candidates don't even have a shot. Like they're refusing debates, they're rigging their own primaries. Florida just canceled their primary, so that way, the other candidates don't have a shot. They're saying we're just going to give it to Biden. So where's the democracy? Because you guys are acting like fascists. You're not acting like you guys are acting like
Exactly.
dictators. You're not, there's no equality. There's no chance. You're taking the voice away from us. So that's why, as an entire country, we have to unify. We have to go against this as one powerful unit and make this shift to say no more.
I agree, and the best way to honestly do that would be, I mean, I was a even just as recent as 7 months ago, I was this like Biden loving liberal Democrat. And I just made a huge switch within the past 7 months of all my positions and stuff. And I think the best way is honestly to reach out to those Democratic voters because we can tell them like we understand and we know the Republicans are not going to give you what you want. We don't want what the Republicans want whatsoever. But
Yep.
what we want you to understand is that the Democrats are also not going to give you what you want. They're going to end up siding with
Mhm.
the Republicans. They might be the slightest bit marginally better on things at like the state level. But other than that,
Mhm.
it's so clear how the duopoly just works with each other and how similar the two parties really are. I used to think months ago that you're out of your mind if you thought the Democrat and Republican parties were like complete opposites. But it's become clear that they are so similar in unison. And that's the whole point of the duopoly. The point of that
Mhm.
duopoly is to preserve corporate corrupt capitalism and have them get polarized so that you continue to vote for them. I mean, if it was like clear and they admitted that like, oh, we're working together, then a lot of people wouldn't vote because they'd be like, if they're Republican, they might say, oh, well, the Republicans are working with Democrats. I don't want to vote for that. Or the Democrats are working with Republicans. I don't want to vote for that. But they continue to push this polarization amongst the American people to think that they're completely different. And that's how the duopoly progresses further and further and further. Well, regresses would be the better word. Further and further and further to the right. Because they're convincing these people that if you vote for this one, you're not going to get this. When in reality, they're just one big thing. So no matter
Yep.
if you vote for the duopoly, you're voting for the other candidate pretty much. And I mean, you're basically asking a vote for both candidates. Whether you hate one or the other, you're voting for both of them basically because you're preserving that corporate capitalism and letting the duopoly move and move and move and move and work in unison. But that's what they don't want you to know. They want you to think they're polar opposites, so they can continue to work and move and move and move and move. And now we're seeing the duopoly become literal fascists over the past few years.
Yeah. 100%. And even Biden said they're all friends this year.
Mhm.
And they're just like, oh, we're all friends, we all get along, we may fight, but at the end of the day we're friends. Like they keep verbalizing it. And in the state of New Jersey, they do work with each other.
Mhm.
They help each other. Their chair committee members speak with each other. So it is a one party system in the state of New Jersey. There is no party that actually works for the people, because New Jersey had the opportunity to even have healthcare, universal healthcare throughout the state. They chose against it. They're doing all these pilot programs across the entire country, but especially in New Jersey, where they're creating these unaffordable apartments and throwing poor people on the street, or they're throwing them into communities where it's there, where education's poor for the kids. There's
Mhm.
not good quality education. It's more industrial, so the air quality is poor. And they're saying, if you're not rich, you don't deserve a home. That's the message that's being sent. If you're not rich, you don't deserve a home. You don't deserve to have clean water. You don't deserve access to a good school if you're not rich. So this is the duopoly is entire party. It's a one party system going against the working class, the individual. And then they complain that, we don't have enough, the population's declining. Well, nobody can have kids when you're saying that we're not going to get health care, when having a kid means I have to choose between paying rent or actually affording a kid. And if I wind up homeless, because this country is not a kid friendly country. So if you wind up working and your job fires you, because jobs have, they're at will and they can fire you for being pregnant. And if you, even fathers, if you ask for any time off, so you have this fear of being let go of your job if you have a kid, the state comes in and you lose your house, the state comes in, removes your kid. They don't actually help you get a home.
No, and you
So,
just defined the failures of capitalism right there, and why
yep,
it needs to be abolished. And the funny thing about that is, and you see this with a lot of people on the far right in the conservative circles, that they will say, "I don't want socialism because this," and list out exactly what you listed out. Because the people who are against socialism, when you ask them what's wrong with socialism, they will list failures of capitalism without
yep,
fail. Because
yep,
guess what's wrong with socialism? Not that. You just define the
yep.
failures of capitalism, and just further proving our point that the United States is so propagandized that we believe scary socialism is bad. And whenever we are told, you know, define socialism, this is the funny thing too. You ask someone to define socialism, they will say, socialism is what causes people to starve. But then 5 seconds later, they'll say, providing universal free lunch to school students is socialism. So which one is it? Is feeding people socialism, or is letting people starve socialism? Which one is
Yep.
it? You can't come up with a consistent definition because these anti-socialists have been so propagandized and brainwashed by the system.
Yeah, and it's really, really sad, because we should all have, like, there are some towns in New Jersey that I'm working with town leaders, and they are protesting and they are going against the system, because they work with this one company, and can't remember the name of the company, and it's very suburban rich towns, and they pay the same amount of money, so they all pay to this company. But in the suburban rich towns, this company gives really high quality food to them. These more minority mixed towns, they pay the same amount that these suburban towns pay, and they get very poor, undercooked, horrible quality food for lunch. So it even goes into, okay, why do people pay the same money, but why do some schools get good food and some schools get bad food? Why do we view people differently based on where they live, based on a zip code? And why do we say people who are rich are valued and considered human beings, so they deserve to be treated as human beings, and people who are poor deserve to be treated as inhumans, deserve to get leftovers? If this is where they live, they don't deserve good food, they don't deserve good anything. It's astonishing.
Yeah, that actually brings up something I did want to discuss about the whole school lunch thing and how just broken it is. And I'm curious to hear your perspectives on it, but the whole school lunch thing has never been right. And I believe that if you're forcing someone to pay for food at a place you're legally required to be at, that's completely exploitive because you have to
Mhm.
eat. I mean, you can't force let's just say like a 9-year-old. You can't force a 9-year-old to just sit at school for 8 hours a day and not have anything to eat. And if they don't have any money, they might not be eating anything. And
Mhm.
I remember back, oh my God, when I was in middle school, whenever there was this program that it wasn't necessarily a program, it was just kind of a thing they came up with. But if you had like any spare food that was like unopened or whatever, you could put it in a bin at the front of the cafeteria. And if someone didn't have a lunch, then they could go and get it from there. But typically it'd be maybe fruit cups or something like really not
Yeah.
sustainable at all. And that's just another, I don't think the people who created we're talking the computers teacher or whoever was the
Mhm.
launch monitors created that. And it's not, and I don't think they had any bad intentions of that in that regard at all, but that just shows like we're willing to just make up something brand new to try to solve the
Mhm.
problem instead of just figuring out what the issue is. I mean, we're dancing around the problem by saying, if you want to have a lunch, here you go. Here's a bin of extra food. Well, it's a cup of applesauce. Instead of
And
actually
that might
providing that.
be, yeah, that
It's
might be what some kids eat for the entire day because the parents can only put the money toward the bills. And you have the capitalists that say if you can't afford kids, don't have them. But then you're complaining about the decline. And then at the same time, you're saying, oh, you can't have an abortion. So if you get pregnant by accident, then you're just like, you have to have the kid. But it's like, where does this argument make sense?
it's just
Because
it's
it
circular
doesn't.
reasoning. No, and
Yeah.
the problem with stuff like that too is you see people online all the time saying stuff like, well, the parents should be feeding them at home. Well, do people realize that there are so many people in this nation that
Mhm.
work over 40 hours a week full time and they cannot afford so I mean you're a very hard worker. I mean you work two jobs and you even mentioned you're still living paycheck to paycheck. It just really goes to
Yeah.
show how much capitalism has failed us, and all these other nations in the world have figured it out what the problem was, especially in those like north and central European countries. They figured out what the issue was. We seem to be the only one who just can't figure out, who can't wrap our heads around why America is going into decline and why we have people
Mhm.
dying, either dying because they don't want to go to a hospital because they'll be in debt for the rest of their life, or be in debt for the rest of their life because they want to avoid dying. It's like when you live under the poverty line, even if you're in the middle class line, some of those hospital bills can be in the $900,000 range, over $1 million. If you looked at some of those
Mhm.
COVID bills that people were getting for spending 2 weeks in the hospital, some of those were well over $1.5 million, depending on where you went. Yeah, it's gonna depend on what hospital you go to, but regardless of what it is, you might have the insurance companies that might only provide $50,000 out of all that, and what's that? It's gonna barely make a dent, or they'll just deny you and just say, "Oh, we're not paying that." And so insurance is truly the biggest scam that humanity has ever faced, and it's
Mhm.
insane. I mentioned this in the last podcast, but the only insurance that you should actually need it's like car insurance. I mean, that's a kind of a
Yeah.
no-brainer, and probably homeowners insurance. But there's no
Mhm.
reason why you should be paying so much a month for. And another big insurance scam, of course, is the fact that vision, dental, and just general health are separate. How does
Oh
that make
yeah.
any sense whatsoever? That they can legally do that. That would be like, oh my God, could you imagine if there was insurance for every single possible ailment? Oh, you have to pay this much for cold insurance, or this much for flu insurance, or this much for COVID
Yep.
insurance. They could probably do that as well and not have any blowback from the government. That's the thing.
Because the
They could be
government's
they
in
could do
your
that.
pocket.
And they're feeding the pockets of the government. But and that's the thing with insurance companies is they could, if they really wanted to, make you buy an insurance for every single possible disease or sickness out there and still deny you at the end. They haven't, and they haven't figured that out yet. Hopefully, no one's listening, so they don't get any ideas. But the fact is that they could do that if they really wanted to. They're so unregulated by the government that if they wanted to create an insurance for every single ailment out there, they could. For car insurance, there's most people just have general car insurance. But could you imagine if there was car insurance for engine insurance, radiator
Mhm.
insurance, tire insurance, trunk insurance, gas can insurance, window insurance, general like crumble insurance or whatever, antenna
Mhm.
insurance, everything. They could, if they really wanted to, they could have insurance for every single part of the car that could ever get broken, and they would get no repercussions from the government, and they'd just be funneling more money out of people.
100%. And going back to the school lunches, we not only need universal lunches for school, but we need universal good quality food for people that are retired and in nursing homes, or if they live alone, especially in rural areas. We need people to travel to make sure that the people who've worked so hard to keep this country afloat their entire lives are taken care of at the stage of retirement. And retirement shouldn't be until you're 70. You should be able to retire between 55 and 65 if you'd like. You've already put a huge part of your life into running this country while raising a family. You
Mhm.
deserve a life of luxury, a life to live, a life of relaxation. You deserve to be a grandparent. You deserve to have your life taken care of, because we're taking care of the entire country. Who takes care of us? We pay taxes. We keep these corporations and everything running like a well-oiled machine. Who takes care of us is we're taking care of everything else. We're taking care of the government, because the government, and this is where they make constantly make the mistake, they think we work for them. They work
Mhm.
for us. So if 25% of Americans went on strike tomorrow, this country would fall. If 26 to 27% of Americans went on strike, another country could come in. So it's just that we're not going to sit there. We'll collapse the entire market if we have to.
I
And
would
people
be
are saying
not
we need a
opposed to that.
general strike, and they're already building up for a general strike.
Yeah, I've been following that a little bit, and I'm all for that. I mean, why not? And
Yeah.
about the universal school lunch thing is another thing, and I've Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania. He has been not as and I'm actually surprised to say that he's been a Democrat that I don't necessarily despise. Unlike Fetterman, who's been a complete oh my God.
Oh God.
Fetterman, I because back last year in the election, I was full on go Fetterman, and I was this huge Fetterman supporter. I actually once was freaking out because I thought I saw him at Dave and Buster's when I was down there. It wasn't him, but I was freaking out because I saw him as like this true guy. And over the past many months, he's been like siding with the far right on so many things, and it's like, oh, he's just another corporate duopolist. And
We
the
voted against
the thing
universal health care.
I know, and that's what I'm wondering is you have someone who claims to be so progressive as him, and to just be all over the place on things. But I digress about him. But for Josh Shapiro, he's one that the problem with Shapiro is he's ignoring a lot of climate activists when it comes to stuff. I mean, if you look at his Twitter, all he tweets about is like basketball. He tweets so much about the Philadelphia 76ers that he doesn't and so be it. But we're not getting enough attention by him, and a lot of grassroots organizations like the Allegheny Green Party and climate activists are feeling very ignored by him because he promised to help with climate change and infrastructure, and we've not got any of that. And th- the thing is with Shapiro is he's like an incrementalist, which I is horrible in nowadays and age. So you have someone who promised $15 minimum wage, which he did technically sign into law, but the problem is it's only going to go up a little bit every year until like 2027. Then we'll get $15. Incrementalism is a horrible idea because that shows that we're compromising with the corporate capitalist duopoly. So instead
Yeah.
of just making it $15 an hour starting the first of the 2024, instead it's going to go up a little bit every year and then reach $15 an hour. So
Yep.
incrementalism is a horrible idea. But the one good thing I'll say about him is that he did sign in universal breakfast in Pennsylvania public schools, and that has been a great asset to a
Oh,
lot
that's
of
really
things.
good.
So I gotta give I credit where credit's due. I will give credit to a politician in the duopoly if they say or do something worth noting. I'm not gonna be just like, oh, they're part of the duopoly, so I can't compliment them. No, I will give credit to someone who acts on something like that. And I have to give credit to Governor Shapiro about that. I think that is really great. You go in there and students have time to eat, and it's
Hmm.
completely cost free with them, and that's a phenomenal idea. Because even if you have kids who can't afford lunch, at least they're getting that breakfast early in the day. At least they're getting
Yeah.
something. Although I'd love to see universal free lunch. We saw that during COVID. Lunch was free during COVID, and up until I think
Hmm.
October of 2022, lunch was free. And the problem with school lunches is, you said you worked in a public school for a year,
Yep. Yep.
so you'll probably relate to this then. The problem with school lunches is you have some small entree, a drink, and a small fruit, and that's all you get.
Hmm.
If you want anything else, we'll charge you $1. We'll charge you $2,
Yep.
and that's the problem. You get you get a small portion of something, and it's not enough to I mean, the small portion of something. I noticed that the portions never changed throughout between first grade and senior year of high school. Nothing has changed whatsoever about the portions of school lunches. That might have sustained me when I was 6 years old.
Yep.
But when you have people that are like 16, 17, 18 years old, you're not going to get sustained by three ends of a pizza, a box of juice, and a cup of applesauce. But in that's not enough to sustain most people. So it's more like a snack, honestly. And you still are paying $2, $3 for it. But if you want anything else, absolutely anything else to eat, we're gonna charge you up $1, $2. Some things I've seen are like $3 extra in my life, and I'm thinking this is just so exploitive. I mean, I just don't understand how they can legally do that, and they actually
Capitalism.
it's very true. Very simple answer, but a very true answer.
Yeah.
And what's actually insane about the free lunches thing, and that was in PA at least, schools around the state actually made more money on the free lunches than they did on the paid lunches. And that's because students thought, oh, well, the lunch is free. And what do they end up doing? Grab like 4 bags of chips, all this extra
Hmm.
stuff, and you're making $8 on a lunch that
Hmm.
beforehand you would have made $2.50. So the thing that could be the really true reform to school
So
lunches would be,
would that even have been considered free lunch?
well, the basis for you get the entree, the drink, and the fruit for free.
Hmm.
But I would like to see a system where you wouldn't have to have students line up, put their number in or whatever. And if you're really worried about them getting snacks, just don't offer all those snacks then.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. And that's the thing I like to see where you can go up, get what you need, and then that's it. The school can afford it. Oh my god,
Oh, 100%.
fundraisers to schools, and we're not even I mean fundraisers wouldn't make a huge impact, it would be more of the government funding. But we're seeing schools waste so much money on fundraising for benches outside that you're not even allowed to use. I remember that was the big stir when I was like 10 years old and in like 4th grade. We had this huge fundraiser and we were told it's going to go to something good and it went to a bunch of benches outside that we weren't even allowed to use.
Why weren't you guys allowed to use it?
They wouldn't give us an answer.
Yeah, that sounds like the school. Do
Yeah.
as I say, don't question me.
Yeah, and we can afford to give students we clearly can do it for universal breakfast because it's a thing in PA right now. And we can clearly afford universal free lunch. And I'm talking whenever you get there, you might have to put limits on it, like you can't get like 30 entrees or whatever.
Well,
But
yeah, yeah.
and that's the thing
Person
that I
wouldn't get
and that's the
30
thing
on food.
that I hear from people that whenever I say I'm a universal school lunch advocate, they'll say, "So you think a student could take like 30 burgers and walk out of there free?" No one's saying that. It's another red herring to distract you from the point. No one's saying
Well,
that.
okay, so the only reason a student would take 30 burgers is because they have friends that are starving.
Well, I
So
guess and that's
yeah,
true. But
so if you have
if you have that universal,
universal, yeah, if you have universal lunch, they're not going to take 30 burgers because then their friends aren't starving because
that's how I
then
was gonna.
everyone's going to get a burger.
Yeah, if you're taking 30 burgers right now, it's because you have people at your table who might be
Yeah.
starving. But under universal healthcare, those people or universal universal lunch,
Yeah.
those people at the table go up there and get burgers. And
Mhm.
it's not that hard to understand. And if they're really worried about, well, we don't want to do free lunch because students will just take a bunch of cookies and chips for free or whatever, just don't offer them then.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. I mean, if you really want to avoid having that, and even with the universal free breakfast, you can actually get charged for it if you take like a pack of cookies or bag of
Hmm.
chips or whatever, or if you take like a certain kind of drink. Oh my god, I remember in middle school and even into the high school, water
Hmm.
wasn't included in your lunch. It was extra for a bottle of water.
That's wild.
Where did they even come up? And did we get, yeah, milk juice, and then they had this thing called switch juice, which is like this carbonated juice. It was actually really good, but it was those were all included. But God forbid, bottles of water aren't included. No, you complain about how the youth consumes nothing but energy drinks, yet you're gonna make them pay extra for a bottle of water. Like,
So you want to hear a fun fact about water
go
and
for it,
bottled water?
go for it.
Okay. So in my policies, I am going to be cleaning the entire water in the entire country and then eventually around the world. And we're actually going to be able to remove all the chemicals, including PFAS. So spring water, you could actually drink that. We currently, in this day and age, there's no regulations allowed for the water. Like they're just like, oh, we have drinkable levels, but it surpassed the drinkable levels, these chemicals and the poison. So they push people to buy these bottled waters. Bottled water is also unregulated.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that where they get the water from is actually where they get it or they're properly filtered. There is zero regulation on bottled water. So you have no idea what you're even drinking, but you're hoping that there's less chemicals and less surprises in the bottled water.
Mm.
So it's just wild and a lot of people don't know that fun fact about water.
That's really interesting. I actually wasn't completely aware of that. I knew there was like some things about how you could like lie about where you got it from the source, but I didn't know it was so unregulated like that. That's really interesting. But that's still, and the thing with that is if you get someone who's against providing universal free lunch to students, they will use that and say, well, that's why we shouldn't give people water. But that's not the point. Regardless of
Mhm.
if it's regular or whatever, there's no reason why a student should be able to get a bottle of water and not have it charge extra. Or, carry with them throughout the day. It's refillable.
100% agree.
I mean, if a student has water, a lot of schools will ban water bottles because they're worried about vodka or whatever, something like that. But then you charge students extra for a bottle of water that they can refill. They can refill it at stations. Most schools now have those little
Mhm.
stations where you can fill up water. And how else are you going to do that? You can't fill it up in a bottle or a carton of milk. You can't fill it up in a Capri Sun juice box. So what do you do?
Mhm. And we need water to function. Our body's made of like 70, 80% of water. And just hearing you even say that one little line, they banned water bottles because they're worried about vodka. That's a bigger issue at hand, and that student needs attention. But you can't tell the rest of the students they can't drink water because you're afraid of one thing.
And let's be honest, how many cases do you really think there have been of students who had water bottles bring in vodka? I can count on one hand, probably ever cases of that. It's like
Yeah,
it's a non-issue meant to distract from what's going on in the real world.
and
And
prisons allow bottled water in. So if a prison, a very high complex system, like even high intensity prisons where they're just like, oh, we got to make sure nothing comes in with drugs and stuff. They even allow bottled water. So what the heck is the school doing banning that?
I don't know. That was the big rule at least in middle school for me, that you weren't allowed to have uh bottled water on you. And I just always thought, well, why? And they would always say, oh, it's
Right.
because of vodka or whatever. Well, if you're really worried about it, you want to smell it? Like, do I have to open it up? Do you want to smell it? Or do you just want to be like, look, there's going to be no fifth grader that's coming in and bringing in vodka in a water bottle to drink in school. You're going to smell it. That's the thing.
If
You're
that,
going to
yeah.
smell it if there's an issue. I've been in the presence of vodka at weddings or whatever, and it 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 is so strong. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to smell it whether you're right next to it or 20 feet away. You're going to smell the vodka or whatever you're worried
Yeah.
about. It's a
And
non-issue.
if the schools are really worried, then they would need to supply the bottle. So at the front door, however many bottles that people need, the school will just have to freely supply the waters.
Or
So
do
then
that,
they
yeah.
know.
Whenever you walk in, boom, here's a bottle of water for the day. Here's a bottle
Yep.
of water for the day. If you're really worried about that, just do that.
Supply the bottle of waters. But that was just wild what you told me. I would have had an if I ever heard of a school doing that, like around my area, I would have had an uproar.
Well, about like the whole water bottle ban, yeah.
Yeah.
Goofy rules, and if you're really worried about vodka, then I don't know what to tell
But in
you
a
because
middle school setting, there's a bigger issue there. There's a whatever the issue is, you need to address it.
That's like the lowest priority you could
Yeah.
ever imagine. I did remember for once when I was in fourth grade, there was still universal ban on bottles, but there was one teacher that still allowed us to have any water bottle on it. And he was like
Mhm.
like we looked at him as like some sort of legend. Like, oh, you're letting us have bottles of water, you're much better than the rest. And then we weren't supposed to, per district policy. And it's just really, really odd
Yeah, it
that
really
we're
is. And
policing
it
that.
speaks to like a very, very extreme control where they just want to hurt. And this is what a lot of adults don't realize, and a lot of people in policy, that they are just like, oh, they're kids, they can deal with it, they're kids, we could do it. Like they
Hmm.
think children and teenagers are like sponges, no, rubber, where like whatever they implement, nothing's going to impact them because they're just kids, they don't know any better. When they keep forgetting that they're little human beings.
Hmm.
They need proper nutrition, they need proper care, they need proper attention, they need proper love, they need just the basic things. But our job as adults is to provide all that, not to take away. We need to make sure that people, like the younger generation, have all the tools needed to grow up to be strong and healthy and focused in school. That's just wild. And then there are a whole bunch of medical conditions where people do need to have access to water. So you're saying like people with medical conditions aren't allowed to have medical conditions? That's
No,
just
they were.
wild.
If you were on a written note and that was signed by the nurse, you were allowed to have water on you, but that was like the only exception.
But then that's also signaling out because no one needs to know a person has a medical condition too.
Exactly. And what about those? Maybe those people brought in vodka. You don't know. They might have brought
Yeah,
in vodka.
you really don't know. But I hate to cut this short because I have to go run somewhere.
It's okay. We were on for almost an hour, and we'll have many opportunities to talk to you again in the
Yes,
future.
yes,
So
yes, yes.
I really, really appreciate you being on here for episode 2 of the Greenway Forward podcast. We almost went an hour,
Thank you
and
for being
honestly, that's perfect enough. Is there anything you wanted to end off with?
Um, just on Twitter Space, I'm doing bi-weekly mental health, free mental health support. So feel free to join. My Twitter Space handle is Khalil for New Jersey. NJ, Khalil, the number 4, NJ. And my website, which has all my social media, if you can donate, because the donations go to supplies, where the supplies go to voters. We're 100% grassroots, no corporate, no dark money at all. My website is khalilforsenate.com, KHALILFORSENATE.com. Feel free to send an email if you have any questions. And I'm looking forward to coming back on here. Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So we'll have you on again, definitely very soon. And I
Yes.
want to finish all the conversations. We still have so much to hit on, but.
Yes.
But yeah, thank you so much, Christina, for being on. I wish you best of luck in your campaign.
Thank you.
And
Thank you
that'll
for
wrap it
having me.
up for episode 2 of the Greenway 4 podcast. We'll be back with episode 3 in a short while.
Thank you.